But when it comes to actually giving them sort of concrete direction, that the thing I keep coming back to when I'm coaching folks on how to interact with some of these AI systems is think of it as a human. So delegation, communication, clarity. What are you trying to accomplish? What does success look like? What does success not look like? What are those sort of the failures? What are those use cases you need to be thinking through? Okay, don't go and do that. And it's iterative. You need to engage with it, look at the output, supervise it, QA it, work through that. And if you're not doing that, if you're just sort of assuming it's an easy button you can press, you'll be set up for failure. And I'm seeing that not just with the more advanced agents, but also just with AI assistants in general.
There are so many topics we can cover with you, and hopefully we'll get another chance to bring you on again for another discussion. But for now, we're just going to talk about human effect with AI. Agentic AI isn't replacing humans, it's multiplying what we can do together.
So when AI handles the busy work and creativity becomes part of everybody's job description, AI becomes part of everybody's job description. What makes agentic systems kind of capable of freeing people up from the repetitive work? Or when you think about the value of agentic in the workspace, kind of what things do you think of?
Yeah, sure. And I think it's been an evolution that's been going on for quite some time. It's this transition or this seeding of some of the sort of the lower value or repetitive work to technology has been going on for decades at this point. And it started more in decision support, providing assistance, providing information, making it easier to get that information so you didn't have to spend so many cycles on that. And so it sort of became the 80% of the time you used to spend on gathering the data, you could spend on analyzing it. What we're seeing is this decision support moving more into decision automation and even sort of task and almost role automation. So it's not new, but it certainly has accelerated, and the capabilities that we're seeing coming online with these recent agents are really empowering. So for me, what I've seen is a couple things. One is you have to adapt to it. Like we have to adapt to this. And it's unsettling at first. And it's not that dissimilar to moving into a leadership role, where as before, if you were a doer, you were just used to cranking away all day. You were doing the task. And then all of a sudden you got promoted. It's like, congratulations. Okay, what do I do? It's like, I don't know. That's your job. You go figure out what you do. And so it can be quite unsettling. You're sort of sitting there like, okay, great. So I've got all these other people doing these things for me. What do I do? And that's where I see, those that are adapting well are shifting more into that sort of almost entrepreneurial kind of mindset, right? Identifying what are those high value things that you are uniquely suited to do. You start to go after those. You become much more of a generalist and an integrator, and you're leveraging these different technologies the same way that you might leverage a team of humans to accomplish the task, right? But you're setting the goal, you're setting the plan, you're the architect of that. And that's both empowering and can be very unsettling and terrifying. So we have to sort of figure out how to build those skills into folks as we go forward.
Sounds like it is going to change kind of how we think about strategic work. And it also sounds like there's some preparing for that or upskilling that would be needed. Brian, I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, how challenging do you find it to build autonomous logic while keeping systems aligned with the intent of the business and the intent of those team members?
It's a great question. I would say state of the art as of late 2025. The hype far exceeds the capability at the moment. In terms of true sort of just set the agent up with a few things and you run off and you go get a cup of coffee and you read the news and all that. It still requires an awful lot of setup, some fairly technical resources often to help with the plumbing and sort of the setting the guardrails. But when it comes to actually giving them sort of concrete direction, that the thing I keep coming back to when I'm coaching folks on how to interact with some of these AI systems is think of it as a human. So delegation, communication, clarity. What are you trying to accomplish? What does success look like? What does success not look like? What are those sort of the failures? What are those use cases you need to be thinking through? Okay, don't go and do that. And it's iterative. You need to engage with it, look at the output, supervise it, QA it, work through that. And if you're not doing that, if you're just sort of assuming it's an easy button you can press, you'll be set up for failure. And I'm seeing that not just with the more advanced agents, but also just with AI assistants in general.
just to go on to that, do you
Yeah.
find it some kind of a combative way of doing life? I remember taking all of our data centers when we merged a lot. We had computer centers in every office. And then we wanted to go to centralized data centers where they couldn't put their hands on the equipment,
Mm.
right? That's a change in the way they do things, and almost kind of it causes some protectionism, right? They want to protect their job, protect their values. Do you find that the same here as far as when people are developing these systems, these agentic workflows, that there's also purposefully human in the middle or purposefully drawn into a conclusion so they can ring the bell and say, hey, I got the answer, kind of a thing. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Not really where it's a business. The business needs this, but the team member wants to hedge their bet on their role, in a sense.
All what you say is true, and we're seeing sort of all stripes of that on the resistance at the individual level. Yes, and I have great empathy for that. It's understandable. It's new. It can be frightening. It can be threatening to their role. So we definitely need to understand that and work with folks to understand that it's not replacing them. It is augmenting them. It's a superpower for them, but there has to be a willingness to work with it at the individual level. But what I'm seeing in terms of actually building these systems, you're absolutely right. And this is also not new. There is a need, I think, to have that supervisory, almost like a dashboard view. You can almost think of it as a human sort of team meeting, right? You have your morning stand up, you have your morning team meeting. You would do something similar with these systems where you're checking in, you're reviewing results, you're providing feedback, you're coaching. It just happens that you're coaching to a robot as opposed to a human, but the same kind of process happens. And even if these systems start to get to the point where they could do the job 199.99% of the time correctly, I think we'll still see that human in the loop as a comfort, but also as a ethical monitoring and guideline. There's some legal implications of having a human making a final decision, say, versus a robot or a machine. And then also even in things like healthcare, there's just an expectation that there's a human there reviewing it. I am finding that, and I've talked with some product leaders and also some startups that have baked in more of a traditional user interface than what AI would be capable of doing because of that sort of that cognitive leap. They didn't want to go too far ahead of their users and abandon or lose them.
So it sounds like in setting these systems up, one, we're still kind of in the era where there's still plumbing, there's still electrical, there's things that have to be stood up on the back end. Maybe in very simple use cases, you can go through and click the button and it'll do it. But for those more advanced use cases, agent to agent, MCP, there's still some plumbing that's being set up, especially for MCP and MCP servers. And then I think an excellent point that you just mentioned, Brian was alluding to, is kind of the evaluation. So we're making this investment, we're setting these agents up, and we're pressing the buttons. Are we seeing the return on investment? And then also, are they able to go accomplish the task that they were set out to do? And then just having some way to evaluate that and continuously improve. In terms of that evaluation, is there any insight or any thoughts into what's kind of meaningful when you're evaluating systems like these?
Hmm. That's a good question. First off I've found that people weirdly maybe index on computers' ability to perform and often have higher bars and higher expectations for any technology than they do for a human. And so let's say a predictive algorithm may get it right 97% of the time. And they're like, oh, but it misses it 3% of the time. And then you look at the human experts and they miss it 10% of the time. But for some reason, there's sort of a different standard. So I think it's compared to what is the question to ask, and looking at, certainly from a business perspective and an ROI perspective, what's good enough, what is sufficient, and using those kind of quality metrics to help guide decisions. More broadly, when I think about all the different use cases that an organization have, I talk a lot about portfolio, treating it like a portfolio, almost like an investment portfolio. Companies have done this with their innovation portfolios or their R&D portfolios or M&A for years. And it's looking at it from different categories of sort of risk. And there's the large strategic bet the company kind of initiatives. And then there's more roughing around the edges, smaller, there's work groups, there's department wide. So you sort of think about it in those different lenses and you rate your, AI initiatives, your agent performance, et cetera. You rate those based on return on investment, but also time involved, capital complexity, et cetera. And you sort of work through all that. I've found that to be a good framework to think about overall investment and not getting too bent out of shape if one of those initiatives fails, right? You're looking at the broader portfolio and your overall outcome.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent insight. Even if it doesn't work 100% of the time, is it still, from an ROI perspective, good enough? Yeah, that's awesome. So, eh, I guess kind of thinking about the theme of creativity and somebody who goes through and sets up these agents, and I think you spoke to it a little bit earlier, but I kind of want to peel it apart a little bit more. Um, it's kind of like storytelling. You're talking about defining what you want it to do, but you're also defining what you don't want it to do, which I think of as different from something that a developer might do. Usually, an acceptance criteria that a developer might say, acceptance criteria 1, 2, and 3, do this, do this, do this. And I know when all these things are complete, then it's working, but it doesn't quite work that way with Agentic. Could you speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah. When I think about creativity with these systems, I tend to look at it more about what you can accomplish now that was either infeasible or impractical before. So when I think about, let's say, an individual's startup founder is a good example, right? They might have to go get a round of investment, recruit a team, set up marketing, set up a go-to-motion. Like they have to do all these things and they've got to pull in resources and it's very expensive. And they might do it, but they might do that only in a couple of areas and then cut corners in others, right? So this starts to open up the potential for them to scale at a capacity at a rate that they could not do before and really approach, say, taking a startup to market very differently than they might have pre-agentic, right? So it starts to turn the equation more about what's possible. To your point about sort of acceptance criteria, and if I understand where you were going at, it was more the certainty element, right? So if it's programmatic, you build a piece of software, you know it's going to work in theory 100% of the time, at least in the way that you've coded it, right? And with these predictive systems, these non-deterministic systems, you get strange things. And so you do need to really, it starts to look more like management of a team of humans. You have differing levels of capabilities. You have people that misunderstand the assignment and go rogue. They have their own ideas. And so you do have to figure out how to create some guardrails and structure around that so that they don't have so long of a leash that they can run off, burn hundreds of dollars in tokens and, burn through your mail lists and get you on every spam filter out there. So yes, there's some things you have to do to sort of keep track of all that.
So, yeah, and from that perspective, it sounds like there would be certain skills, certain skill sets, and roles that would be valuable in this agentic feature. Are there any specific ones that you want to call out that you can think of that haven't maybe been mentioned yet?
Skill sets are probably more germane to the conversation because I'm not sure that there are specific roles. They're being defined and they're coming up with names and we're seeing them evolve and then wisp away very quickly. You don't hear prompt engineer very often anymore, for instance.
Yeah.
So much like any other advice I'd give to a college student or whatever, it's focusing on the core, what I call core skills, soft skills, leadership skills, however you want to frame them, problem solving, it's creative thinking, just learning, lifelong learner, growth mindset, all that good stuff. Like I think there are things that are just so foundational to any entrepreneurial or leader kind of mindset that apply now to everybody because everybody's a leader, everybody's a manager, no matter what your skill set or role. Beyond that, I do believe there is still, because these systems aren't what the hype suggests they are, you need to understand logic. You need to understand not coding per se, but certainly have a sense of data literacy, technology fluency, analyst type of skill set. They seem to resonate really well with this. There's a hope that agents start to bridge the gap between where we hadn't successfully gone with no code and sort of that idea of anybody can build a solution if you just drag and drop the right box. We've never been able to cross that chasm for a variety of reasons, but I see now that this may be the right sort of citizen analyst, citizen developer opportunity to start to build some pretty impressive capabilities.
I think
Certainly.
when you brought that citizen developer part, It's like we're not really managing technology anymore. We're managing collaboration between intelligences, right? Is AI allowing us to overcome silos and cultural resistance?
Hope springs eternal that it can. Yeah, I think it will. I think it will. What I'm seeing, and I'm seeing in the organizations that I work with and talk with as well, is there is a continued shrinking of the core of IT to really what's foundational infrastructure, the things that only a true technologist can still help with, right? So it's infrastructure, it's networking, it's security, it's the blocking and tackling that everything is built upon. I include data management in that. But what I'm seeing is with that shrinking of the core, there's more technologists like people that are aligned either dotted line or directly to different business units. And then I'm seeing more cross pollination of business units working with each other. So you're seeing sort of outside of that core in the periphery where there's more about business enablement, thinking, marketing automation and financial systems, reporting, supply chain, these kinds of things. You're seeing more people both embedded in there and then also working across teams. That said, the organizational inertia of some of these silos is still very strong. I do think there will be continued disruption in the competitive landscape that will force companies to be like, okay, we can't operate the way we used to. We have to do something. It will be compelled upon them to make a change. But it's a lot of inertia there. You all, I'm sure, have
Yeah.
seen it as well.
Yeah.
So, just from this conversation right here, how Agentic is bridging the gap, the skill set, it's not just AI helping us work smarter, it's helping us kind of work bigger or think bigger. AI is capable of just crushing data at a ridiculous pace and then kind of getting the so what out of that. So, I'm going to read you a statement. I'll want to get your insight and see if you agree with it or not. Tomorrow's CIO won't manage IT, they'll manage ecosystems of intelligence. Thoughts on that?
Shaking my head, which our listeners can't hear. Yes, I do think that I've been really fortunate to have, and Brian, I know you have as well, to be in an IT leadership role crossing multiple paradigm shifts. So we both started our careers on I'll call it more on the infrastructure and plumbing side of things. And that was what you had to be as an IT professional because that's all that mattered. It was just enough to get the data centers running and get email flowing and the network connected. And that was a miracle in itself. Then over the last, 10 years or so, shifted much more into the CIO as a transformation agent, as a business partner, however you want to phrase it. But it's definitely more on the business side of things now that we have things like cloud and strong service providers out there that make running the plumbing not easy by any stretch, but not requiring the attention of the CIO. I think you're right. We're not there yet, but I see the next transition being in the next couple of years where the CIO is going to have to even step away from more of that business transformation mindset to be much more a curator and an enabler of these intelligence systems that are supporting the business. So it's still to the same end, but if the CIO is just setting up the next SaaS solution for the sales team, that's not really moving the needle in the same way that the CIOs of yore that were very infrastructure focused had a hard time making the jump to business sometimes. I think we're going to find the same thing here. And for those CIOs, upskill, same thing applies, right? Upskilling, getting smarter with these, working with their own agents and starting really getting themselves immersed in it. They don't have to understand everything, but every leader, and not just the CIO, I think every leader needs to work with this and understand to truly understand its capability.
It feels like the next era, the next shift is on its way, to your point. And kind of that future of leadership is handling those systems. So I think it's clear that we're heading into a decade that's defined not just by automation, but by that augmentation of leadership, of decision making, of being able to take very complex actions really, really quickly. And that seems like the next competitive edge that we're driving towards. So I'm going to kick it over to you, Brian.
All right. Well, I think we come to our close. And Matt, do you have anything else you want to share on this topic just as we wrap up?
Yeah, one thing I'll share that you mentioned early on the book. So this is not a plug for a book, but it was more that we wrote that. I partnered with someone who was a freelance sort of future of work person and freelance. And we talked about the human cloud and the machine cloud. We called the book The Human Cloud because it sounded punchier. But this was back in the late 2010s. And the notion and sort of what we talked about in this is that in the future, which I now realize we're 5 years in on this, the future is not just humans, it's not just technology, it's combining the two and building a hybrid team of humans and AI and other solutions that work together. So I guess my thinking on this is not to over index on the AI side, not to forget the people as a leader. These tools are great for individual productivity, absolutely. But they also work really well when woven with human team members that are co-creating, that are collaborating together. So don't lose sight of that.
Yeah, I don't think we can ever avoid the people, process, and technology point of this. It's a triad that you have to keep equal and balanced. Otherwise, your solutions don't work.
Absolutely.
You're weak on one area, you will find some issues.
Absolutely.